Why is defining the scope of work in construction so important? This video will cover what is project scope, is it clear in the contract, why is getting it right so important, and we'll take a quick look at a construction example. So what is project scope? The project scope sets out what is to be undertaken. This should be detailed in the relevant part of the construction contract. For example, in the NEC standard form of construction contract, which is used heavily in the UK for civils projects, the scope will be found in the section titled the Works Information. So lesson 1 is that the project scope must be clearly detailed in the contract that you may have received, and this should be in the correct section of that contract. Tip 1 is that if you receive a contract with an unclear scope, challenge it and insist it is changed before starting work on site. Once you start work on site, you lose your leverage. At this stage, you may feel pressured just to let it go, as you want to maintain a good relationship with your client. However, this should not be prioritized above protecting yourself contractually. Besides, a reasonable and competent client should want the scope to be defined clearly as well. If they don't, this could be seen as a warning flag. We need to use foresight to see why this is so important. If elements of the scope are not considered at contract negotiation stage, it can be blurry or unclear what is required once works are underway. This inevitably leads to arguments further down the line about what was supposed to be done at the outset and what is included in the contract sum. This can create significant uncertainty to all parties, slow down payment, prevent works being signed off, and lead to costly dispute resolution. It needs to be emphasised how important this is. If you are a contractor and you sign up to a contract where you haven't killed scope and it transpires that you have taken on more work than what you have priced for, you could find yourself in deep trouble. Typically, the only way in which the agreed contract sum can change is where there has been a variation to the scope of work. If the scope isn't clearly defined, then there will usually be an argument whether a variation actually existed. The client is likely to argue that everything is included. This happens time and time again. Lesson 2 is that the project scope must align with the project price, and this needs to be looked at during the pricing process. A tip would be to list everything out as you're pricing it. We'll look at tendering in more detail in another video. There is often a lot of factors to consider when defining scope. Let's take a relatively straightforward example of the construction of a road. It's not as simple as construct road from point A to point B. There is a long list of things to consider when defining the scope for the construction. I'm not an expert, but some things that I would think of is the specification, the preliminary works, welfare, environmental factors, disposal of waste, is traffic management needed, who would do that, permitting requirements, the road markings, street signs, etc. etc. I'm sure there's a lot more, but you get the picture. In this video, we've learned that the project scope must be detailed in the correct section of the contract. If you receive a contract and this isn't the case, challenge it. If you get this wrong as a contractor, you can run into some serious money problems. Always align project scope with project price, and there's usually a long list of things to consider when defining the scope. This is extremely important, so it's worth spending the time to get it correct. Okay, so what now? The usual spiel. Leave a comment, let us know your thoughts on the video. What else would you like to know? Can you suggest some topics for some more videos? If you found this video useful, please subscribe, because we'll be adding a lot more.